King, and you're watching Positive Conversations, where we interview leaders and scientists who are making a positive difference in the world. I want to personally welcome members of our live community who are joining us for the interview. We're happy you're here, and we'll be asking a few of you for your questions at the end. Our co-host is Dr. James Pawelski, professor at the University of Pennsylvania Positive Psychology Center. James, want to go ahead and introduce our guests?
Hugh Evans, he's an Australian humanitarian. He's the co-founder of both the Oak Tree Foundation and Global Citizen, which is a global poverty project. He's received domestic and international accolades for his work in promoting youth advocacy and volunteerism in order to reduce extreme poverty in developing countries. And secondly, we've got Lindsay Hadley. She was a founding member of Global Poverty and the Chief Development Officer. Now she's one of the most sought after consultants in the nonprofit sector.
Okay, you have come a long way to both of you since we first met back in 2012. What has Global Citizens done since that date, almost 10 years ago?
Well, Larry, firstly, thank you so much for having Lindsay and I on your program today, and thank you, James, as well. I mean, Global Citizen has come, as you say, a long way, and our most recent campaign that you may have seen on television was One World Together at Home, the 8-hour broadcast special, really focusing and uniting the world behind COVID-19 response. And it was hosted by Lady Gaga. It featured everyone from the Rolling Stones through to Sir Paul McCartney. And that campaign raised over $127.9 million in commitments to support frontline community health workers so that they could have access to personal protective equipment, whether that was, protective goggles, shields, face masks, the things that they needed to respond. And so that's really one of Global Citizen's most recent campaigns. But, we wouldn't be here today without the amazing support that you provided us in those early days. I still remember the dinner at your house back in the day. And candidly, Global Citizen would not be a success if it wasn't for you and the amazing support that your entire family provided.
Lindsay, you've dedicated your life to ending global poverty. Why made you so passionate to this cause, which seems will never be totally cured?
Thank you for asking that, Larry. And I just want to echo what Hugh was just saying about thanking you and your family for supporting us in that first early moments of the impetus of this initiative. My I guess, passion around trying to end extreme poverty and help with any worthy causes around the world really comes from the empathy that I experience as a human being. And so it's, for the lack of just where a person is born, they can go without a vaccine that would lead them to a life of polio. It was just by chance that I was born where I was and had the opportunities I had as I've engaged in the world actively. I can't help but feel incredibly moved to try to do something if I have the opportunity to.
I want to go back, Hugh, to what you led with about the incredible amount of money that was raised through this charitable work and music. So in the research that I do, I look at the ways in which the arts and culture, like music, like movies, like art and so forth, interact with human flourishing. But it seems like whenever you hear about large amounts of money being raised for charity, so often it's music. Why is it that music brings us together in a way that allows us to be generous?
Well, I think throughout history, music has always been the great uniter. If you cast your mind back to the abolition of the slave trade in the 1800s, and that song Amazing Grace became that anthem of the time, or the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and songs like Marching on Pretoria became the anthem of anti-apartheid. I think it's also true today. Music is that one unifying factor, much like sport and entertainment, where it brings everyone together under one umbrella. And so when Lady Gaga curated the most recent One World Together at Home special, she brought, the Rolling Stones, Elton John, Sir Paul McCartney, everyone came together at this critically important moment because music has that power to stand up for the issues that we all care about intuitively. And so I think that, I don't know about you, but whenever I want to unwind, I always listen to music. I think it's the way in which we as human beings reflect on the world that we're living in. So it creates this cathartic power to it, in my view.
Lindsay, how did you get involved with you?
You know, I actually got solicited a cold call from Wei Su, who's also one of the founding members of Global Citizen in the early days, and Mick Sheldrick, who are still with Global Citizen today. And they'd heard that I was the charity concert lady, and I'd been producing music concerts, like Hugh described, utilizing the captive audience of people at live events to espouse causes and enroll people in taking an action. And they asked me to produce this music festival on the eve of Chugum, the Commonwealth dignitary meeting for all these world leaders of the Commonwealth, including the Prime Minister at the time was Julia Gillard of Australia. And I had never heard of Global Poverty Project at that time. And when they told me that how they had a tiny team of, tiny little staff, and they had no budget, and there was a few months away. Most of these music festivals need a year runway minimum to be a success, and tremendous amounts of money and support. I almost hung up on them, but then they're incredibly inspiring. I can't take any credit for the strategy. It was so disruptive and powerful in my mind that I jumped and built my parachute on the way down. But they said, we're not going to rely upon ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorship, or donations from the general public like most of these charity cause concerts do. We're going to gamify engagement and have them sign a petition to win their concert tickets to to help end polio. We were so inspired. We took it to the World's Oyster in Central Park, where I had the honor of executive producing. Hugh and I had a week to come up with literally $1 million. We had raised $6 of the $7 million we need to produce this event. And that wasn't even paying artists to perform. That was just to shut down a third of NYPD and produce this event in the middle of Central Park during the United Nations General Assembly meeting. And it was so intimidating. And we were absolutely under the gun. Like, I remember just every day on the phone with Hugh feeling like I was on the seat of, the precipice of falling off a cliff. And we called Danny and Tilly, your darling stepchildren, and we asked them, do you think Larry would help us host a dinner at his house? He's a legend. And if he would get behind us, we feel like we could get some high net worth donors to come and support us. And it was because of you. Literally, you saved us by the hair of our chinny chin chin. I can't stress enough what a pivotal moment that was to make this all possible. So thank you.
Mob scene in Central Park.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I have this picture here that I thought would be fun to show. This is the first year's Global Citizen Festival. I don't know how well you can see this sea of humans. There's 60,000 people there on the Great Lawn. And Larry, you would have been backstage with Hugh and I partying and celebrating the miracle that this was.
And Hugh, if I had to guess, my guess would be that kindness and fairness might be character strengths of yours. You're a fantastic example of how one person can make an impact in a journey that, it sounds fun to talk about now, but on the way, I'm sure, must have been incredibly difficult, especially at times when you're like, oh my goodness, we need $1 million by tomorrow. How do we get there? So I'm curious, what was your inspiration when the going?
Well, firstly, James, thanks for asking. But first thing I would say is that it's always a team effort. One thing I've learned in my years is it's never about one individual. It's about an extraordinary group of people who all look at a common goal. In this case, it was about building a movement of citizens to eradicate extreme poverty. And everyone, Lindsay, Danny, everyone that Lindsay mentioned were critical in that success. And you yourself, Larry, were a linchpin. And I think that, so that's the first thing I'd say. But as in terms of my personal inspiration, I think, my motivation is a couple of things. It's my family, it's my faith, it's my shared belief, as Lindsay said, that it is the lottery of life that we happen to be born where we're born. And so I've always, when I went to the Philippines when I was 14 and met a young kid who was also 14 at the time named Sonny Boy, he lived his life in extreme poverty, and we're still in touch today, some 30 years later. And so I believe that extreme poverty can be eradicated. It is possible. It comes down to individual communities and governments, and we all have to achieve change at all levels. And so because I've seen the progress that humanity has made, I've seen the data is on our side. I'm buoyed by the fact that, we need a great recovery post-COVID. COVID has certainly set us back years because money has been diverted away from other interventions towards global health now. And also the economy has stagnated. And so when you've got economic stagnation, millions of people will be plunged back into extreme poverty. So to your point, Larry, about a date, you're right, 2030 has been the target. I actually think that it's going to be hard for the United Nations to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 in light of COVID, because I think that, you know, it was already going to be a $350 billion a year challenge. Now it's going to be an even harder challenge. So we need
harder now with this global pandemic to be a global citizen.
Well, I actually think it's more important now than ever, because we need to fight against vaccine nationalism. We need to make sure that people don't hoard vaccines just for the rich and the wealthy, but they're available to the community health workers, the frontline people who need them most. So I actually think there's never been a better time to be a global citizen, because these values are values that we should all espouse.
Lindsay, what are you doing with your time now?
Oh, well, I have a consultancy that we help other individuals, often people from the entertainment industry and a lot of private family offices and corporations and other nonprofits, help them build their initiatives. We recently just launched a campaign with Kenneth Cole and the co-founder of Kate Spade, Pamela Bell, around mental health and mental wellness in the middle of the pandemic. And it was called How Are You Really? And it reached 600 million people in a couple of days. I was just so impressed to see the vulnerability in which, you know, celebrities joined in and everything, and people wanting to help.
James, they're an amazing twosome. Do you have a couple of final questions?
Yeah, I wish we could talk for another hour or two. This is really so important and meaningful. You know, one of the questions that I have for you is, you've worked with some of the most successful people in the world, celebrities, as you were mentioning, for example. What is it about your work? What is it that really makes people want to step up and be a part of what you're doing, do you think? What fundamentally motivates people?
I think donor confidence, or confidence that your resources or your time or your actions actually result into real change. I think humans are so innately empathetic. Like, we have such natural herd mentality. We want to protect each other. We care about what we output, and we want to see that it actually eventualizes into something real. So I think, you know, these initiatives, sometimes the pop and sizzle of celebrity and entertainment or whatever can feel a little trite when it's like, how did that actually make a difference? And that's why I was proud to be a part of the work at Global Citizen, especially our, you know, that first event we did at the end of polio, where we could directly attribute, you know, at $1 per vaccination, that 118 million people got vaccinated as a result of our efforts through that advocacy. I think that when you can show results, you can paint a picture, show a roadmap, build that confidence. That is so inspiring, and it moves people to action every time.
So my final question for both of you is, the work that you're doing clearly is so incredibly important. What impact would you say it has had on your own happiness or well-being or sense of meaning?
You know, it's such a good question. It's so vulnerable and real, because I know what you guys are doing here with Positive Voices and Positive Conversations is being honest about positive psychology. And I know a few years ago, burning the candle on both ends of the stick and just working so hard. And, you know, when you're tackling these audacious goals, sometimes you can overextend yourself and find yourself depleted. And I think that I used to have a real mantra. I had to change the world. I had to save the world. I had to, you know, and I had to have these big numbers, and these big outputs. And some of the things we do have these really impressive metrics and impressive, you know, claims. But ultimately, what I've tried to learn more in my recent years as I get older is that you just have to change one person's world, like especially starting with your own and your own heart and your family. If you can see the humanity in others, and you can show up and be vulnerable and be real, you can really create a real purpose-driven life. It's a life that's lived for other people is the only life worth living for me. And I know that my personal mental health has at times suffered from the exhaustion and the feeling like it's never enough. I'm on a treadmill and I can't do everything. Interpersonal dynamics, stressors, just being human, you know. And so stopping and recognizing with gratitude the humans I've been able to engage with.
I have a couple of audience questions. Sean asked Lindsay and you, both of you, how did you get from having a dream to making it a reality? You?
I mean, I think to Lindsay's point, it was a ton of hard work. I don't think there's any shortcuts. And, you know, certainly with our work, you know, we were a startup organization. We were literally operating in a broom closet in Lafayette Street in Soho in New York. We had not even an office with a window. We had nothing. And we tried to grow from that to, you know, now we've become, you know, the largest movement for the eradication of poverty on the planet in the last 10 years. And there's literally no shortcuts. I'd say that you have to surround yourself with extraordinary people like Lindsay, who are willing to work incredibly hard. You also have to have a great strategy, and you also have to have a willingness to execute that strategy with a high degree of discipline. My own personal mantra has always been, you have to be willing to take extraordinary risks. And I think in the first year of setting up the festival, when we had the dinner at your house, Larry, that was an extraordinary risk in 2012 because we were on the precipice of failure. And, I could have packed my bags and gone back to Australia with my tail between my legs, and it would have been a different story. But I think if we hadn't taken that risk, then we certainly would not be the organization we are today. And we call ourselves the 10-year-old startup. We want to have the same scrappiness today as we did back then. So every dollar matters, every hour of the day matters, and we work incredibly hard with that diligence. And so I think that for those that are watching and viewing and want to do something, when you create an organization like Global Citizen, you have to throw your heart and soul into it, and we were certainly prepared to do so.
So Larry, you must get people, over the years, you must have gotten a lot of people wanting to, ask for your help for various things. Why did you respond the way you did when Hugh and Lindsay reached out to you?
I was very intrigued by the concept. I like both of them very much. They were obviously wonderful, obviously enthused, obviously very, very sincere. I thought it a worthwhile project, but not attainable.
I love your candor.
I wasn't optimistic. Of course, that first night at Central Park, that changed my mind about a lot of things. I'm glad to see they've done so well with it, and I hope they can eradicate it by a target date. You're the Batman and Robin of world poverty. Amazing couple. I remember that dinner very well, and it's so great talking with you. Thank you so much.